Сегодня, в последний день уходящего века, я ухожу в отставку.
Boris Yeltsin resigns.
For December 31st, 1999, it's NPR's All Things Considered.
Yeltsin hands power to his designated successor, Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin.
Putin is popular for the war in Chechnya, but Russians don't know much about him.
Also, the hostages in Kandahar, Afghanistan are free, so are the hijackers.
In dealing with the hijackers, government was guided by two concerns: the safety of the passengers and the crew, and the long-term overall interests of our country.
The coming of the new year, as experienced around the world.
Lost and found sound, what our quest for sound found.
And the mysteries of Antarctic sound.
That's coming up after this news.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Corey Flintoff. Midnight just tolled in Western Europe, and it's being greeted with fireworks and celebrations rather than power failures and disasters related to the Y2K computer problem. NPR's Sarah Chase is live with us from Paris as people celebrate the first minutes of the new year. Sarah, where are you right now? Can you describe the scene for us?
Yeah, I'm standing in the Place de la Concorde, which on any night is one of the most magnificent places in this magnificent city. And what they have done is they're making the Eiffel Tower go off like a fountain of light. It's really quite amazing. It's fireworks that are exploding from the Eiffel Tower, and at first it looked like it was a rocket that was going to go off. And then now the whole Eiffel Tower is sparkling, and right at the midnight moment, there was a flash of light that just filled the entire sky. On my left, there's a giant Ferris wheel. Directly in front of me is the obelisk that Napoleon brought back from Egypt, which the Washington Monument is modeled after. And then there's the Champs-Élysées, which is that famous avenue stretching up to my right. And there they've got another set of Ferris wheels that now are starting to turn with performing artists, each doing different performances according to a different theme.
Sounds like the City of Lights is still lighted. Thank you and Happy New Year. NPR's Sarah Chase in Paris. The second of two planes carrying passengers held hostage more than a week has landed in New Delhi. Their release earlier today came after the Indian government freed 3 jailed Kashmiri separatists in exchange for the 155 passengers. From New Delhi, Martha Ann Overland has more on their return.
The exhausted but smiling passengers and crew of Indian Airlines Flight 814 were greeted by cheering crowds at the Indira Gandhi International Airport tonight. Relatives threw flowers into the air and whooped with joy when the doors of the planes were opened. The passengers were weak from their 8-day ordeal, but visibly relieved to have returned safely. The hijacking ended today after the Indian government agreed to release 3 men accused of terrorist activity in exchange for the hostages. The government initially said it would not negotiate with terrorists, but pressure increased after a passenger was stabbed to death. There are now reports that one of the hijackers was also killed. His body was found in the cockpit of the plane after it was evacuated. The 5 remaining hijackers were released into Taliban custody, but there has been no word on their whereabouts. For NPR News, I'm Martha Ann Overland in New Delhi.
On Wall Street today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed up by 44 points to end the day at 11,497. Advances led declines by a margin of more than 2-to-1 in light trading of 377 million shares. This is NPR News from Washington. Elliot Richardson, a former Attorney General under President Richard Nixon, died today at a hospital in Boston. He was 79. Richardson resigned as Attorney General in 1973 rather than carry out Nixon's orders to fire the Watergate Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. Richardson later wrote that he believed the Watergate investigation had to be independent in fact and appearance. The investigation led to Nixon's resignation. A Cuban immigrant made his first appearance in a Tampa courtroom this morning to face charges related to shootings that left 5 people dead and several injured yesterday. Susan Giles reports from member station WUSF in Tampa.
Tampa police are charging 36-year-old Silvio Izquierdo Leyva with 5 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of carjacking. Leyva is being held without bond, and police say he has given no account of the fatal shootings of 4 of his co-workers at the Radisson Bay Harbor Hotel. Leyva is also charged with the murder of a Tampa woman who resisted his order to turn over her car. Leva's family says he changed after a recent trip to Cuba to visit relatives. Leva had expressed the desire to become a Santeria priest. It's an African religion of God, spirits, and sacrifice. When police took him into custody, Leva was dressed in white, the color that signifies purity for the Santeria religion. For NPR News, I'm Susan Giles in Tampa.
Doctors for George Harrison say the former Beatle is expected to make a full recovery from a stab wound to his chest and may be able to leave the hospital within the next few days. The 56-year-old rock musician and his wife were attacked by an intruder yesterday. The suspect has been sent to a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. I'm Corey Flentoff, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations and the Lila Wallace Reader's Digest Fund, working to make the arts and culture an active part of people's everyday lives.
This is NPR's All Things Considered. I'm Robert Siegel.
I don't know, Adams. Russia is beginning a new era. President Boris Yeltsin announced today he was stepping down and turning over power immediately to Prime Minister Vladimir Putin. Presidential elections are expected at the end of March. NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports from Moscow that Russians are reflecting on the legacy of their first post-Soviet leader.
Russians were just making last-minute preparations for their biggest holiday of the year when President Yeltsin made his stunning announcement.
Сегодня, в последний день уходящего века, я ухожу.
On this last day of this century, Yeltsin said, I am resigning. Looking somber and pale, Yeltsin stressed that he wanted to make way for younger, more energetic leaders. He had one person in mind, Prime Minister Vladimir Putin, now acting president. Like a czar handing over his power, Yeltsin invited the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church to the Kremlin to watch as he signed his resignation decree. Yeltsin then led Putin into the presidential office and handed over the nuclear suitcase. The 68-year-old Boris Yeltsin has always been seen as a bold, if unpredictable, leader. Many analysts like Andrei Korchunov see Yeltsin's decision to step down now as an example of his sharp political skills.
It's a logical political move. The president made up his mind. He made his choice. His choice is Mr. Putin, and he wants to create the most favorable environment for Mr. Putin to run and to become our next president. So it's quite logical to have early elections so that potential rivals to Mr. Putin will fail to mobilize their forces and to present a serious challenge to the nominee of Boris Yeltsin.
Putin has shown himself to be worthy of Yeltsin's trust. Today he signed a decree offering Yeltsin immunity from legal prosecution. This is a significant issue because Yeltsin and his family have been hit by allegations of corruption. Analysts said the Yeltsins were looking for assurances, and Putin was the man who could offer them. Analyst Andrei Piankovsky, a longtime Yeltsin critic, believes this was the main motivation for Yeltsin's sudden resignation, to make sure Putin becomes his successor. Piankovsky has little positive to say about the Russia Yeltsin leaves behind, noting that the outgoing Kremlin leader started 2 wars in Chechnya and failed to carry out genuine reform.
He was instrumental in the breaking of the communism, but he created a system of bandit capitalism, and this is his real heritage. Plus 2 bloody war, and the latest war is still going on. I think his heritage is terrible.
Out in the streets of Moscow, some shared this view, while others seemed somewhat sad to see this part of history come to an end.
Жалко, с одной стороны. Все-таки с ним очень много в нашей жизни произошло, и мы много ожидали.
It's too bad, says this 50-year-old man named Yuri Petrovich. We expected so much from Yeltsin and did get a lot, despite the disappointments. Many today were remembering Yeltsin's brave stand against communism and a coup by communist hardliners in 1991. Yeltsin himself seems to be thinking a lot about his legacy. When he addressed his people today, he apologized for not living up to their expectations.
Я хочу попросить у вас прощения.
I want to ask for your forgiveness, he said, because many of our dreams were not fulfilled. What we thought would be easy turned out to be painfully difficult. Boris Yeltsin headed home from the Kremlin for the last time today. But the debate about his legacy will linger on as Russians prepare for new elections, which at this point seem likely to confirm acting President Putin's hold on power. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, Moscow.
Joining us by telephone from Moscow now is Lilia Shevtsova, who's a senior associate of the Carnegie Endowment there. Lilia Shevtsova, one thing that we in the West have always thought of about Boris Yeltsin is that whatever else, he put his leadership up to a vote. He embraced an election and was the first elected leader of Russia. Do we know whether Vladimir Putin is similarly committed to electoral democracy in Russia?
We don't know anything about Vladimir Putin. We know only that he is Yeltsin's successor. And we know also that he will organize his own elections. And we know also that Mr. Putin has at his disposal all financial, administrative, bureaucratic resources of the state. And probably he is not only the president de facto. Very soon probably he will be president de jure. And he would lead this country into the new millennium. But still, few people know who Putin is and what are his views about economy, Russia, the world, and everything. We know only his views about Chechnya, where he gained his absolutely amazing skyrocketing approval rating. But this is it.
He will be able to, during the time that people are campaigning in this election, Putin will also be, I suppose, in control of what Russian forces are doing in Chechnya. So he'll be, to whatever extent he is in control of that situation, in control of the war, which is accounting for his popularity, as well as running a campaign for re-election.
But during the 2 months, probably they can create at least the illusion of the victory in Chechnya. And Mr. Putin already published his presidential program, where he emphasizes himself as the supporter of the statism, of the great power in Russia, and tries to distance himself from every marginal and extremist forces. So he wants to create his own base, which would include left and right forces and centrist forces. He wants to be the guarantee of the new political centrism.
His own background is, well, first in the KGB and then later running its successor agency. What does that say to Russians? Do they say this is someone who's been looking out for us, or is this somebody whom we should be afraid of, or what?
You know, for Russians, he represents a new phase of power. Nobody is thinking about his KGB background. It's not important for Russians anymore. It's not important for younger generation. But it is important that Putin represents so-called power structures. And people who are fed up with pathetic, inadequate, old, and sometimes absolutely, lame duck power. They want to see an iron hand. They want to see a new and powerful political leader.
One other point about Putin, there's a photograph of him that I've seen on the World Wide Web, and I gather it was seen throughout Russia, in his judo outfit. He's a martial arts black belt, I gather.
Oh, yes. Well, and now nearly all TV stations and radio are trying to picture him as the personality who is strong, and this is one more evidence that he is strong, that he is powerful, that he is skillful, that he would be probably the first powerful political leader in Russia. Simply, this is one more element of this new image of power. Power must be strong, and power already demonstrated that it is strong during the Chechnya War.
Lilia Shevtsova, thank you very much for talking with us today.
You're welcome. Happy New Year.
Lilia Shevtsova, Senior Associate of the Carnegie Endowment, spoke to us from Moscow.
"155 passengers and the crew of a hijacked Indian airliner are safely back in New Delhi. Their 8-day ordeal ended after a deal was struck between the hijackers and the Indian government India freed 3 imprisoned Kashmiri separatists in exchange for the plane's passengers and crew. NPR's Michael Sullivan reports from New Delhi.
The first plane load of freed hostages arrived here shortly after 8 this evening. Some waved weakly and managed to grin as they walked down the stairs of the aircraft. One man bent down to kiss the ground as he reached the bottom. Outside the terminal, bedlam, as passengers tried to fight their way through swarms of cameras and microphones to waiting cars for the ride home. One of the passengers, businessman Vipin Menon, described what he said was the worst moment of captivity.
Yesterday they said that they would shoot us. Yesterday in the morning. So all of us were terrified, absolutely. We don't know what's going to happen. They said by one hostages they'll shoot. Don't harass them, they're already harassed.
The passengers' ordeal started on Christmas Eve when the plane was commandeered on a flight from Kathmandu to New Delhi. It then hopscotched its way across South Asia and the Middle East, stopping in India, Pakistan, and Dubai before arriving in Afghanistan on Saturday. One passenger was killed early on, an Indian national who'd been on his honeymoon. The hijackers demanded $200 million in cash, the release of a jailed Muslim cleric, and 35 Kashmiri separatists being held in Indian prisons. In the end, they settled for the cleric, Maulana Masood Azhar, and 2 of the separatists. The 3 men were flown to Kandahar this morning on a plane that also carried India's Foreign Minister, Jaswant Singh. Shortly thereafter, the 5 hijackers climbed down from the cockpit of the aircraft and, along with the freed militants, sped from the airport in several vehicles. The Taliban, which rules most of Afghanistan, says it has given the men 10 hours to leave the country, after which they will be forced out. But it's not clear where they would go. Neighboring Pakistan, which acknowledges giving moral and political support to Kashmiri separatists, would be a good guess, but a spokesman for Pakistan's military government tonight said the men would not be allowed into the country. Back in New Delhi, in a televised address to the nation this evening, India's Prime Minister, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, defended the government's handling of the crisis.
As you are aware, the hijackers had demanded the release of 36 terrorists. We were able to substantially scale down their demand. In dealing with the hijackers, government was guided by 2 concerns: the safety of the passengers and the crew, and the long-term overall interests of our country. India shall not spare any effort to thwart the phenomenon of terrorism itself.
But the criticism of the government's decision to allow the separatists and the hijackers to go free has already begun. Some analysts say it will only boost the morale of Kashmiri separatists fighting against New Delhi's rule in the Muslim-majority state. Brahma Chalani is with the Center for Policy Research in New Delhi.
The country is going to face increased threats from the forces of Islamic fundamentalism and terrorism. The relief over the release of hostages is going to be very brief. When everything is over and India calculates the losses and the gains, there'll be very few gains to count.
Nonetheless, most Indians are welcoming the release of the hostages, 155 people for whom this New Year's Eve is much more than just the celebration of the millennium. Michael Sullivan, NPR News, New Delhi.
The New Year around the world next on NPR's All Things Considered.
This is NPR's All Things Considered. I'm Robert Siegel.
And I'm Noah Adams. The world has been watching 2000 arrive for many hours now, with the new year coming first to the island nation of Kiribati in the South Pacific. Industrial countries have been waiting to see if any computer problems surface with the stroke of midnight. So far, airlines, utilities, and banks are not reporting any serious troubles. We have several reports on how people are welcoming the millennium in different parts of the world. And we go first to NPR's Sylvia Poggioli, who's at St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. Sylvia, just turned midnight 20 minutes ago where you are. What was going on there at that time?
Oh, well, first, just a minute before midnight, the sky exploded with fireworks. It was really quite something. The basilica was completely bathed in multicolored lights. And then just after midnight, John Paul appeared at the window of his residence overlooking the square, and he gave his blessing, Urbi et Orbi, to the city and to the world, in which he wished the world a Happy New Year. And I think you can hear that here there's still fireworks. There are people, there's tens of thousands of people in the square, many of them with their own fireworks, and they're continuing to celebrate with champagne and bottles. And many of the people in the square came here earlier for a concert, a blend of pop and gospel music. The groups played on a large platform on one side of the square, and for quite a while the colonnade of Bernini surrounding the square was vibrating some very loud sound.
Sylvia, how many people are that? You said tens of thousands. Is the square completely filled up?
Oh, it was very packed, really very packed. They were watching the concert on one side on the stage. There were several big screens. And then the very large avenue leading up to the square is called Via della Conciliazione, has quite a lot of people on it also, mainly young people.
And how did the Pope look this evening?
Well, he appeared quite frail, the way he has now for some time. His hand trembled. Also, he has difficulty walking. So today, for the second time this week, the Pope moved through the basilica on a new mobile platform, a kind of moving stairway with railings that was pushed by two Vatican ushers. There's something about the Pope's increasingly visible frailty that may be attracting many disabled people to come to Rome for this Holy Year. I saw many people on wheelchairs passing through St. Peter's Holy Door this week, and they stopped to kiss the frame. I'm not sure if it's a conscious effort on the part of the Vatican or not, but as if Rome has become something of a Lourdes, where people come in the hopes of being cured by a miracle.
Thank you very much, Sylvia.
Thank you, Noah.
NPR's Sylvia Poggioli at the Vatican in Rome. Now we go to Jerusalem, where NPR's Jennifer Ludden is standing by on the Mount of Olives. Jennifer, I understand there's been a service there tonight?
Yes, there was a prayer vigil at the Church of Gethsemane, which is next to the olive grove where Jesus, of course, spent a night in agony as he was being betrayed. There were hundreds and hundreds of people who turned out. It was the main religious event of the evening. Afterwards, there were prayers outside the church, across from the old city walls, and then a procession to a place where there were fireworks that went off at midnight, and now basically there's a party.
The Mount of Olives was expected to be a gathering place for some Christians who believe, indeed, that the new millennium heralds the second coming of Christ. What's been happening with those people?
It seems that actually most of the, what we might call apocalyptic Christians who believe that the second coming would happen tonight have either been detained or deported. Israeli security has been extremely vigilant. They've deported about 100 people this year, arrested several dozen in the past few weeks. They were worried that these people would commit violent acts to try and provoke a second coming. What we've seen today, throughout the day, are very peaceful, nonviolent prayer vigils, gatherings of Christian pilgrims, many of whom do believe that we are living in what the Bible calls the end of days, meaning that Jesus will return in our lifetime. But many of them said to me, we never expected anything to happen tonight. In fact, the Bible tells us no one shall know when Jesus will make his second appearance.
And in general, about the security today, does it seem overwhelming, the sense of security there?
It doesn't seem as overwhelming as we were led to believe. Israeli officials said there would be 20,000 police and volunteers, 12,000 of them in Jerusalem. I haven't seen that, but they're certainly along the main routes, along this procession route that I went after the prayer vigil. There were soldiers with guns posted all along the way. You see Army jeeps cruising around the Mount of Olives in the Old City. Heavy security, but not overwhelming.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
NPR's Jennifer Ludden talking with us from Jerusalem.
This is Julie McCarthy in Greenwich, England on the Prime Meridian, the world hallmark of time. With less than an hour to go before 1999 ends and the year 2000 begins, festivities are in full swing here at the Millennium Dome. The billion-dollar showpiece designed to depict a modern Britain poised for a new age boasts the biggest roof in the world, covering 20 acres. As the millennium sweeps across the time zones, the occasion is uniting humanity. At least 1 billion viewers are expected to tune in to watch the spectacle unfolding here. Watching on television might be a warmer bet. The dome has no heat. A 21-gun salute was fire enough for the Queen and her royal party as they passed the Meridian line, represented by a green laser that illuminated the night sky. A trumpeter's fanfare heralded the royal arrival at the pier astride the Thames. The Dome was to host 12,000 guests. A snafu with ticketing kept many away after a wait that in some cases stretched to 7 hours. Those who have managed to get in will watch an extravaganza of choruses and choirs and cascading snow from the roof at midnight. The Queen and her guests will be treated to an erotic aerial ballet with 2 near-naked dancers clad in body netting suspended 145 feet above the central arena. That's after the Archbishop of Canterbury recites the Lord's Prayer. 10,000 bottles of Tesco champagne will be popped. The Queen will hoist a toast to the assembled. Earlier, she launched the biggest party in Britain's history at the London Tower. She was handed a torch that triggered the laser that lit the Millennium Beacon, one of 4,000 beacons and bonfires that will be lit across the land. Julie McCarthy, NPR News, at the Millennium Dome in Greenwich.
This is NPR, National Public Radio.
Support for National Public Radio comes from Archer Daniels Midland Company, makers of all-natural vitamin E, ADM, supermarket to the world, on the web at admworld.com. eLoan, a company that provides home mortgage and auto loans online with rates from 70 national lenders, on the web at eloan.com. And GTE Internetworking, a worldwide provider of strategic e-business and internet hosting solutions, on the web at internetworking.gte.com. This is NPR, National Public Radio.
You're listening to KUAT Tucson, 1550 AM, and KUAZ Tucson, 89.1 FM. on the next edition of New Letters on the Air, Into the Millennium, a special show that takes a comic look at our Y2K fears, while also presenting works by poets and fiction writers who, like The Mask of Janus representing January, look both forward and back. Join us for this light fantasy, which also addresses some serious issues about renewal and change. That's New Letters on the Air, Sunday at noon, following A Prairie Home Companion, here on Z89. It's 4:30, time now for Arizona News. In Tucson, I'm Jeff Rice. Although indications around the world are that Y2K problems may be minimal here as the clock strikes midnight, Arizona law enforcement officers will be out in force in preparation for possible problems. Virtually all officers are on call in readiness. The Pima County Tucson Office of Emergency Management's Emergency Center is also up and running in preparation for Y2K. Manager Kim James says the center opened this morning, but it won't be fully staffed until this evening.
The majority of the representatives from the local utilities and fire and police agencies will be here by 6 o'clock tonight. So we'll be pretty well activated at 6 and just watching what's going on with all the resources available.
James says people staffing the center are keeping track of any Y2K problems across the world by keeping abreast of the latest new reports. Even though officials are tracking what's going on around the world in terms of Y2K, James says the real impact on Arizona, if any, can't be gauged until time changes begin in the United States.
For direct immediate impact, we'll have to wait and see what really happens when we go over to the to change over to tonight at midnight. However, it'd be very similar to what we saw a couple of days ago, where those bank credit card checking machines in London had some trouble. It was very specific to that particular machine, the way it was programmed, and we won't know until something like that happened to us locally. However, that whole industry learned that there may be a potential problem. Let's establish a contingency plan, or let's put in whatever contingency we can to prevent that from happening here if we see the same thing start.
The state's Emergency Operations Center is also up and running and is expected to be in continuous operation into next week. And Arizona Emergency Management Director Mike Austin says people needn't be worried about having their water cut off because of possible Y2K problems. He says local water systems shouldn't have any problems because they depend on gravity as well as equipment that is not date sensitive. Governor Hull and her husband are outside Arizona today, planning to spend New Year's Eve in Mexico with friends as they traditionally do. Spokeswoman Francie Noyes says the Hulls are spending the holiday in Puerto Penasco. That Sonoran resort community is also known as Rocky Point. Hull's absence from the state automatically makes Secretary of State Betsy Bayless the acting governor, but Noyes says Hull can return to the state quickly if needed by DPS aircraft. Noyes says that in the meantime, Hull could give any emergency orders by telephone, or Bayless could do so in person. Hull on December 16th declared that Arizona was prepared for any Y2K problems. 2 people are reported dead and 9 others injured after a van overturned early today on I-10 just east of Benson. Authorities say the eastbound van was packed with 22 illegal aliens and flipped after blowing a tire. The Border Patrol has picked up nearly 1,000 undocumented immigrants in the past 48 hours in southern Arizona. 175 were in a group near Douglas and the other 102 near Karchner Caverns. Spokesman Charles Klingberg says the area is still a hotspot due to increased efforts at Nogales.
Closing down the avenue of entry through Nogales is sending the people eastward to try to gain entry.
Klingberg says the addition of new agents and high-tech monitoring equipment in the new year will hopefully discourage activity in the area. Still no water service at Picacho Peak along Interstate 10 in southern Pinal County. A water line broke overnight, and authorities say it had nothing to do with Y2K. A repair crew is working to restore service, but in the meantime, an RV park at Picacho Peak State Park and several businesses at the interstate exit are without water. The unranked Colorado Buffaloes trounced the 25th ranked Boston College Eagles 62-28 in the Insight.com Bowl today in Tucson at Arizona Stadium. At its peak, the stadium was only about half full with an estimated 30,000 people. Dreary wet weather combined with possible Y2K fears may have kept some people away, but Boston College fan John Stevenson was more concerned about his team's poor showing than the New Year changeover. Were you concerned about the Y2K situation traveling out here? Or?
No, not at all. I mean, we put everything in God's hand, but it's a pretty fun time nevertheless.
Yeah. Love this sunny Tucson weather?
Tucson's nice, and it's a good bowl game. The people treated us right. Colorado's a good team, but I'm just disappointed we didn't show up to play. That's it.
The Fiesta Bowl will be held in Phoenix tomorrow. The Arizona Humane Society says think about your pet before activities kick in for the new year. Spokesperson Kim Hicks says pets should be kept indoors.
Concerned about lots of pets escaping, as they always seem to do on New Year's Eve, but there's a real concern about random gunfire, and just as people have been victimized, pets could very easily be victimized as well.
Hicks suggests turning the radio on for your pets so they won't hear all the noise ushering in the new year. Just about 6:36 for KUAT and KUAZ, I'm Jeff Rice.
This is NPR's All Things Considered. I'm Noah Adams.
And I'm Robert Siegel.
I am the Edison phonograph, created by the great wizard of the New World to delight those who would have melody.
Good evening. This is Ed Merle.
Today I also got a letter from Emil. In his P.S. he said, we ski in 43. I sure hope so.
Part of our Lost and Found Sound series on Fridays all this year has been a collaboration with you, our listeners. Through our Quest for Sound phone line, you've shared with us your precious home recordings. And here with a look back and forward at the Quest for Sound is our curator, Jay Allison.
Our team spent a year with your voices. We built a database full of the sounds you told us about. We called it Big Mama. Big Mama held more than we could ever embrace in 1 year. In fact, we're still wrapping our arms around it.
Wish that I could call you on the telephone.
This, for example, is a song we retrieved from you. One of hundreds. You'll hear more about it in a minute. The year has been too short. We've not yet heard the Texas Man's collection of bodily noises from before World War II, or the hidden cassette a father left for his children to find after his death, or the surprising number of answering machine messages from adopted children searching for their birth parents and finding them. We haven't had time to bring you the cassette recording of Hoover the Talking Seal. Okay, I suppose we have time for a little bit of Hoover.
All I'm asking out of life.
Next year, we'll occasionally bring you more of the simple and astonishing things you've told us about. But for now, we want to reflect a bit.
Forever and a day.
In listening to you, we learned a few things. For example, the invention of the microphone, we speculate, created in mankind a compulsion to croon into it. A few restrained themselves, like, surprisingly, the woman whose voice you're hearing now, Mabel Doki. Here's her granddaughter, Cameron, who called our quest line to tell us of her grandmother's early, secret career as a singer on the radio.
She had her own copies of these recordings in a drawer in her house. She had never played them and never mentioned them to any of us. She gave up singing because she had a family to raise, and it proved impossible for her to keep on recording on the radio. We were all incredibly blown away and delighted to hear what my grandmother sounded like after all these years, and I can't help but hope that in this year, in which she will celebrate her 93rd birthday, perhaps for the first time in more than 60 years, my grandmother, I'm getting all choked up, could hear her voice coming from the radio once again.
Hiya, baby, they'll love me honest, honest, baby, I'm in love with you.
It is not only music that you preserved. You saved sounds, too. Pure sounds that conjure memory. the dinner bell at summer camp, the squeaky slam of your old screen door. Consider the tape described by Bill Murphy of Massachusetts, whose daughter was homesick at college.
We sat down and made a tape, audio tape here at home that we could send to her, and it was a tape of all the noises of the house, if you will. Toilets flushing, water running, dishwasher running, a doorbell, dog barking, a garage door opening, a vacuum cleaner running, all of those without any human voices. We just sent all the voices of the day-to-day operation of the house. And it was kind of well received.
And it worked. The sounds cured her homesickness. But more than sound or music, we've found it is the human voice that holds power over us.
The tape is from 5 years ago. It's my 4-year-old daughter, Katie, and she is talking to her grandfather, who is lying in a coma after suffering multiple strokes from heart surgery.
This is Stephen Vance, calling from Pennsylvania.
She sings some songs, tells him she loves him, and blows kisses to him.
Lily says hi. I love you. I blow you some more kisses.
The most dramatic thing about it was when we took it in to play on her little Fisher-Price tape recorder, all of the beeping alarms that he was setting off by spasms and seizure from the tubes and his breathing problems stopped for the full 8 to 10 minutes that the tape ran.
I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away.
And when it completed, they all started up again.
Bye.
The sound of the human voice rivets us in the present, as it ties us to the past. So many of your messages use this phrase, "It is the one thing I have left." Like Trudy Avi from Wyoming, whose husband died of a brain tumor 8 years ago. She saved a single answering machine message of his to play for their 3 children as they grew up.
This is the only recording I have of their father's voice. It is typical of Michael, his dry sense of humor. He's imitating Wilbur the horse from a TV series. It's sort of silly, but it's something funny, and I thought it shows his sense of humor, so I'll play it. I don't know if that's what you're interested in, but it is a voice from the past.
Wilbur, feed me a carrot, Wilbur. I went out of this barn. I'm at work, Wilbur. Give me a call.
The recording was from my tape machine at home on our telephone, and that reminds me of his sense of humor, and that's something that's hard to pass on to children after someone has died.
Voices are the true ghosts. They invisibly inhabit our space. They haunt us. They are filled with breath, as real as a lock of hair.
What I have is a piece of tape of my 14th birthday party. The thing that makes it significant is that my mother, who was a cancer survivor of throat cancer, actually sang Happy Birthday to me.
This is Michelangelo Castellana, calling from California.
She was a singer when she was young, and then, of course, being struck with cancer, never really sang again. So it was a remarkable experience. You hear young, silly voices and people trying, the kids trying so hard to convince her to do this because, of course, the tape, then a reel-to-reel, was running.
Sing Happy Birthday, anything.
I can't even reach that note.
Or sing anything. Come on, a little thing.
Come on, sing, man. You're being Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Michael and Linda. Happy birthday to you.
We have discovered in the power of vanished voices what we've come to call the universal ancestor phenomenon. A grandfather's voice, enhanced by the love of the grandchildren who sent it to us, and then shared on the radio, is somehow transformed to become everyone's grandfather. A human link is made, and for that instant, nationalities and races are joined. All the dead are one. Your mother is mine.
I'm wearing a white John, I haven't a lot to say.
And this indeed is the sound of my own mother singing when she was in her mid-20s, half the age I am now.
Oh, balmy fair John, she was so young and fair, John, and we missed her sair in the land of Lee.
I came to the Lost and Found Sound Project honestly. I was the son of a father with a reel-to-reel, and a shelf in our family's living room contains boxes of our voices. My partners, Davia Nelson and Nikki Silva, the Kitchen Sisters, are the same. When we began work, we started by sharing sounds from our past.
Daddy. Mommy?
Davia only discovered hers, though, when she stumbled on tapes her father had forgotten completely.
Whoa. Davy. Right, but Davia.
This is the voice of Davia's mother, before she was killed in a car accident when Davia was 5. Now, like so many of you, this is the only record she has left. And Nikki Silva shared a special voice, too. Special because it spawned this whole series in a way, and it's a mystery. Discovered in Nikki's father's garage, the voice resides on a 78 RPM wax disc. From the handwritten label, we know it was meant for a serviceman named Louis, stationed in England during World War II. When the Kitchen Sisters played this old disc, it spoke to them fresh as the day it was cut, and they realized it was one of thousands.